Ahoy, and welcome in to another exciting episode of Not Allowed to Die, your podcast about mental health, where I, Dan Migler, social worker and life enthusiast, answer your questions about mental health. Also, talking about my experiences as a school social worker and a therapist in private practice. But always remember, if you have questions for me, you can email me at daniel.maigler, that's Maigler, at live.com. And in the background, as always, is my intrepid podcast partner, Mariska, the three-tooth Patterdale Terrier. And right now, you can hear she is not licking her paws, which is a good thing because that means you guys have been doing a great job of rating and reviewing the podcast. She always appreciates a couple more. The Thanksgiving season is coming up, and Mariska gives thanks for that kind of thing. And she wanted me to remind you that we do this in part to draw attention to Paws for Patrick. Paws for Patrick is an organization that brings the love of animals to the people who need it the most by connecting people to emotional support animals, providing support in acquiring the animal and getting emotional support animal letters so that for people who need to have an animal in their dorm or apartment, we can do that. So today, Mariska is super extra excited because she always loves it when we have a guest. And today, I've got Heather Hester. Heather is the founder of Chrysalis Mama, which provides support and education to parents and allies of LGBTQIA adolescents, teenagers, and young adults. She is also the creator and host of the podcast Just Breathe, Parenting Your LGBTQ Teen. As an advocate and coach for parents and allies, she believes the coming out process is equal parts beautiful and messy. She works with her clients to let go of fear and the feelings of isolation so that they can reconnect with themselves and their child in a meaningful, grounded way. Heather creates a space where growth and shifts can occur through education and empowerment, instilling the confidence that anyone can move through the coming out process with understanding and love. She also works with companies, DEI initiatives to educate and empower their employees. She's a writer, married to her best friend of 27 years, the mother of 4 extraordinary kids, 3 of whom are LGBTQIA, and a student of life who believes in being authentic and embracing the messiness. And I have to say, yesterday I was running my LGBTQ group at school, and I was telling them that I was going to have on the podcast this week someone who is an expert in helping parents through this process. And they were so enthusiastic because, and one of the students said, "My mom needs to listen to this." And I said, "Well, guess what? I've already emailed your mom links to this podcast." So I am truly a fan of your podcast. And so it's so exciting to have you on. So Heather, can you tell us, how did you get into all of this?
Well, thank you for having me. That was such a lovely introduction. And I was studiously taking notes here because I was like, oh, that's so beautiful the way you said all of that. Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here to talk to you and Mariska. And I got into this it was so super unplanned. My oldest son, almost 6 years ago, came out as gay. And at the time he was 16 years old. And we had no idea. We did not see it coming and did not know what to do. We were pitifully underprepared or unprepared, just completely unprepared, not even under, to be able to support a kid through the coming out process. We didn't even know there was a process. So the first 8 months really of our journey were really, really rough because my son went from being a very typical oldest child. He was overachiever. He was very good at that. Okay, this is what people want to see from me. So this is what I'm going to put out there, right? Well, meanwhile, the turmoil that he was going through and had been going through was just boiling up and really hit, I think, once he was able to come out to us, his parents, and we were, accepting, affirming, loving, even though we had no idea what to do. And neither of us grew up in families that were necessarily accepting or affirming, but that was just our, this is our kid. Why would we do anything else, right? And so he really, really just spiraled and struggled with, he was already kind of a high level anxiety kid, right? And just, so they were we were putting the Band-Aids on it. We really had no idea how to even support him through that. And so it just became this initial okay, how do we, this kid is really struggling. How do we support him? What do we need? What does he need? How do we find this information? And and it just, the spiral kept going down and down and down to the point where he was using very maladaptive coping techniques, strategies, not the tools that any of us had been learning. And we did almost lose him to suicide. And at that point, we were like, all right, something really drastic has to be done. And he was not only in danger from himself, but he was in danger because of some of the external coping techniques. There was some danger on the outside as well. So we did have him. We live in the Chicago area, and we found an intensive therapeutic place in California that works with kids like Connor, and we sent him there almost immediately. And he was there for 7 weeks. So fast forward, we're going through this whole process with him, and about a year in, I thought, this is insane that we are having to go through this, like that this is so difficult, that it has been so difficult to find information, that it has been so difficult to find support. And I just felt like I was in this like constant, like really intense advocate, not only for my child, but for myself and for our family. And it was just so difficult. So I thought, well, I've found now all of these great resources. I'm going to start putting them into a website, which is what I did. And that's how Chrysalis Mama started. And it really was just like a place for me to dump all these great resources. And I'm a writer. So I just started writing, like, it was kind of a good journaling place for me to like put my thoughts. And then, 3 years ago, I thought, well, it was getting really great traction. What's a better way to reach people and to really help people know that they're not alone on this journey? And there are so many pieces to it. That's how the podcast was born. So she is 3 years old this month, and I'm delighted. And of course, things have just kind of spun from there. So as I've seen a need, I've tried to step in, and it's, as you know, this is a niche that needs more people, right? Needs
Mm-hmm.
needs people, needs information, needs support, needs advocacy. So that has become from, a parent in crisis to, I don't want people to feel the way we feel or we felt. So it's my life purpose.
Well, I think what I love about your podcast is covers that intersectionality of, LGBT parenting an LGBTQIA kid is never just about, just that. It's also about how is it with interaction with family, the intersection with mental health. Because and obviously as a school social worker, yeah, and I've said on my other podcast, when I'm dealing with a kid who has treatment resistant depression, it's almost always related to either an untreated trauma or sexual orientation and identity issues that they're not really being able to process. And so these things, like, no kid, and obviously I'm sure all 4 of your kids are very different, and all kids are different. And that being said, these, like, we need, I got started in my work with queer kids in part as a social worker, because just doing the numbers, and the highest risk groups for suicide being LGBTQIA kids. And so, okay, at Barrington High School, I needed to start a group for that. And then just learning so much from the kids. And that's another thing from your podcast has just been great, is seeing the evolution over time as you keep learning more things and learning with the community that's growing up around you. My sister, and we've talked offline, that, when her son came out, my sister has always been a huge ally and really comfortable in the community, would go with her good friend to see her son do drag shows and things like that. And she had known her son was almost certainly queer from when he was young. He just, there was a lot there that were suggesting it. But when at 13, he finally came out, this anxiety and panic washed over her of, what do I need to do now? Do I need to start researching PrEP, which is an HIV prevention drug? It's like, no, he's 13. We can just take a breath. And so I remember her calling me up and say, it's like, there's just these fears. And I said, really, you need to be probably more, life is probably going to be harder for your heterosexual daughter than, your queer son. But what are some of the things that when you're working with parents that they're just having, like, what are some of the anxieties that you're hearing a lot of from different parents when their kids are coming out?
Well, I think you just hit on one of the biggest one is that there is just this kind of natural fear that washes over, and it is almost like almost always about their life is going to be so difficult. It's going to be so different. It's going to be challenging. They're going to run into, this, and this. How do I prevent that? Right? How do I stop that? How do we change this? What do we do? Right? And so it's like this initial, such extreme panic that you almost have to kind of work through that and get that to settle first before you can even talk, before we can even talk about anything else. And it really then just becomes, talking about, and as you know, it's very different, if your child, whether your child is coming out as gay, or if your child is coming out as trans, or if your child is coming out as non-binary, right? Those are three very different identities,
Mhm.
orientations that need very specific support and education, right? So then it becomes really just this education piece where, I really just kind of let the questions come and discuss how to become educated, because I believe that once you have that knowledge takes that anxiety way, way down, right? And your child feels that, because if you're anxious and you're worried and you're scared, even if you're not saying that out loud to them, they pick up on that energy and they're like, "Oh, well, should I be afraid? Should I be, am I really that, is there something wrong with me?" Right? And that's where that
Mhm.
whole like there's something wrong. Um, my child is different. That's another big thing. Well, I don't like to use that word,
Mhm.
you know? And that's something that, over time, it's something I never would have even thought about before, but now I'm highly sensitive to, because I think, "Okay, this is like that subtle messaging that we don't wanna say to our kids," right? And we don't wanna say to ourselves. So, I don't know if that really clearly answered your question, but
Yeah.
that
Yeah, but it did. But this idea of that it's just an overwhelm, like a wave of just fear that hits people, and that while this may be your first time going through this, you're not the first family to go through it. So we can slow down and look at examples from other people. And I think in all mental health treatment, and the most underutilized skill and tool is psychoeducation of the family. And it's so incredibly important in helping any person. I mean, even if you're a person who's 27 dealing with anxiety, but having your family not get it, not understand, can be so damaging and make you feel toxic in a way. Now, I do need to make sure I'm making it clear. Being queer is not a mental health disorder. So I need to, like, so any of my listeners who are thinking because I'm saying that it is definitely not a mental health disorder. It is only a disorder. So like there's things like gender dysphoria or sexual identity dysphoria. So if you are feeling bad about yourself because you are atypical, or you're something other than the norm, then that's the problem. Being who you are is not a disorder or not a problem. It's just the stress of that. But so back to, yeah, like that idea of, so where are some places that you first direct people to, like some resource? Obviously, there's resources on your page, but where are some other ones that people are like, oh, that book or this other podcast or thing really helped me to frame this a little bit differently? Where are some first spots to check?
Oh my goodness. Well, okay, one of my hands down favorites is the Trevor Project.
Hmm.
Love, love, love the Trevor Project, not only for what they do, but they have such a deep resources available on almost every topic. So I really love them, and I really love their research. They do really
Hmm.
solid research, which really helps to give an idea of, I think it kind of takes away that piece of, oh, I'm alone, right? To being able to see that and be like, okay, I'm not alone. And there are, once down the road, here are some ways we can help, right? Here's some things that we can do. Um, and I love that they have support for kids. Not only their crisis line, but they have a chat line. They have
Mhm.
online chat that's monitored, which I think is really, really important for our kids who love to be online, right?
Yeah.
And want to have that connection with others who are in going through similar things that they're going through. So, love Trevor Project. For parents specifically, I always direct to PFLAG. I think, PFLAG is wonderful, especially if you are an in-person support type of person. Not everybody is. So that is something that is lovely to have that, in-person community. Um, they also have incredible resources online, as far as their national PFLAG goes. Um, Podcasts. So I have a couple that are more specific because one of the things that people do ask, and it is, kind of a niche of a niche, but it is the whole question around religion.
Mhm.
And, I know for me, it was definitely a huge piece of my initial learning and unlearning. And so I do always refer to Susan Cottrell and Freed Hearts because that's all she does. And she has a podcast, she has a book, she has website, and she's phenomenal when it comes to that. The other person I refer to for that is Colby Martin, and he did a whole very specific study on, it's called Unclobber, and it's like really, so if you're really like, if religion is a sticking point for you,
Mhm.
those two are really, really great books, websites, podcasts to listen to. So
Yeah, what for people who are, in the Christian faith community, I think Jen Hatmaker does a lot of great writing, and
yes.
also Glennon Doyle are
Oh,
two. And you know, we could probably wax
I
on with our
love
fandom of Glennon
her.
Doyle as the.
Yes.
And, one of the things in reading Untamed that I occurred I wasn't even doing well, which is the greatest gift anyone can give you is their trust. And when someone comes out to you, that is such an incredible expression of trust. And
Mhm.
in Glennon's book, she pointed out that like so many families will say things like, "We love you no matter what," but that's setting a subtle message. It's trying to be positive, but it's sending a message that you're not okay. Like it's as if you have this disease or you've brought home an iguana or something else like that. So this idea that we really need to celebrate that. And so for
Yes.
me, it's shifted my speaking to every kid who comes out. My first word is congratulations.
Right.
But so for you, is that something that you're seeing with people that they're kind of like, oh, even with this deformity of your soul, we're still loving you? Is that like how it's
Oh,
being expressed by some families, or?
yes, that is a huge one, and I love that you brought that up. Well, first of all, love that you brought up Glennon Doyle because that would have, if I would, I just want to keep talking, but I mean, that is my personal, like, love her so much. Probably it's unhealthy. But I'm reading Untamed again for the second time. I just started it again last weekend, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is," even reading it again, I am picking up things that I didn't pick up before just because
Mhm,
I'm in a very different place than when I initially read it. So, super cool. But yeah, so the languaging around that, and like you said, I think sometimes in some cases it's very much said without even realizing what they're saying, right? It's
mhm,
not meant to be a there's something wrong with you. I
mhm,
love you even though, right?
mhm,
So I'm always when I talk about this, it's like very specific that it's I love you,
mhm,
period, right?
mhm,
And it's not even though, but right? The qualifiers on the end then make it not unconditional love anymore, right? So, we don't agree. Like there's a whole list of things that, even though we don't agree with your lifestyle, which like let's pick apart how many words we hate in that sentence. I
mhm,
mean, holy cow. But that is something that people, many, many people encounter, so it is good to kind of have your responses ready, right? And and just also, if it's being said to your child and that is not the way you run your household, that's not what you believe in your household, it is perfectly okay to, circle back and, you know, address that directly,
Mhm.
because I think that's so important for our kids to know that we've got their back and that, you know, we're advocating for them. Of course, whenever appropriate, it is good to kindly, gently correct others,
Mhm.
right? Um, so something something else that you had said that I really thought was so sorry. I lost my train of thought. It's totally gone, but it was something that you said that maybe you'll say it again. I'll be like,
Yeah, we'll circle back to it, but well, and you were mentioning about, again, back to the online piece, and there are so many people. One of my coworkers, he didn't realize he was gay until he was in his 40s, and his wife said to him, "Dude, you're gay." So people's space, so it's actually a gift for some of these kids to be able to realize at 10, 11, 12 that they're queer. But then you personally had to deal with the challenge of, when you're a young queer person, you want to date, you might not have people in your high school, people who are like know who they are yet. And a person who might be 24 might actually have more in common with a 16-year-old because they might be at a similar place in the coming out process. But how to deal with the fact that, like, if people are making bonds and there's a significant age gap, or there could be dating. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience with having your son kind of make a connection with someone who is older, and how you navigated that?
that is a beautiful question. So, initially, I will tell you when he first came out to us, in that first week, and we were very much in that stage of asking all the questions that you should never ask, right? Like, are you sure? I mean, I still like, and I tell people that all the time because I don't want people to beat themselves up for asking that question. If that's a question you ask out of like, I I'm trying to, like, get my footing, right? So, the important thing is that you circle back to it and address it and apologize for it, right? But we were at that first stage and, "So is there somebody at school? Do you have a crush on somebody?" And I will never forget, he kinda looks at us and he was like, "Well, I'm not really attracted to high school age kids. I'm attracted to older guys." And I was kinda like, what do we mean by older? Like, like 19 older, like older, there's a lot
Yeah.
older, right? And so he wouldn't address it. Like that was something that was not addressed that he wouldn't talk about in those initial few months. Um and because we were in a place of just floundering. We had no idea the apps that were out there, the
Hmm.
websites that were out there, the ways that um, kids can connect in potentially very unhealthy and dangerous ways, which is
Hmm.
exactly what he did. So he initially did and he was doing it because he just needed to talk to people who were right. But as you and I both know, there are also people in that world who are preying on kids that
Hmm.
are right. And so, that's why it did become a very dangerous situation. However, all of that being said, he did once he did, get through those first couple years and graduated high school and went off to college. Um, that was still his very much as like, I'm just, I don't really connect with guys my age. I am attracted to an older guy. Um, and he started dating somebody who was significantly older than him. And initially, my husband and I are both like, I don't know what we think about this. Well, I mean, as it turns out, like, it didn't matter,
Hmm.
right? They had this, I mean, they just broke up after being together for 3 years.
Wow.
And this human being is one of my very favorite human beings in the whole world. And he just was so great for Connor and vice versa. And they had this lovely relationship. So what I learned, is one of the many things that we've learned along the way is that um, gay male relationships have their own set of rules to them, their own
Hmm.
way that they work, that, lesbian relationships work very differently, right? Heterosexual relationships work very differently. There's a reason why that worked. And so I would say to any, parent who's kind of encountering this is you know, obviously stay in tune, ask questions, but it is not the end of the world. And I am grateful every single day for this person being a part of Connor's life. So,
Well, that's one of the things that kids, when I was talking to them yesterday, were saying, the biggest misconception that heterosexual people tend to have about queer people and their lives is how much sex is in the sexuality. That, some parents, I had the kids say, well, my parents said, I don't need to know. I don't care who you want to kiss or do whatever else. But the reality is, this is a part of a person's identity.
right,
And for most of us, 99.9% of the time, we're not kissing or in a sexual contact with anyone, but
right,
it's about who we are. And even in relationships, again, if my wife and I, the vast majority of the time we're together, we're not copulating, we're not doing
right,
anything. It's not like but again, people hear sexual orientation, and again, they cannot move past the sex piece of that. And I
right,
think, what I hear you saying is, if you are making your child feel like they can't be open with you because you're going to judge or throw a ton of advice on them that or do other things, then they're going to hide things.
right,
And making it so that they feel safe, that no matter what they're doing and what they're sharing, you're not just, again, like, if whether it's about alcohol and drugs, whether it's about the way they drive, the more we are radiating judgment and don't do this, the more they're just going to hide things from us. And then we're not going to find out about the scary things that could be going on, so it's about keeping that openness. Am I hearing it correctly on that?
I mean, 100,000% yes. And I mean, if I could, that is probably in the top 3 of my biggest lessons learned that I try to share all the time with people is just keeping that openness. And, a close second would be part of that is, educate yourself.
Hmm.
Learn, 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 because the more you understand, whether it's your child's identity or sexual orientation or mental health or I mean whatever it is, right, the better you can support your child, and the better you can create a very authentic, open relationship where it is this, like, you can be very calm in your just your energy and what your and your support of this kid so that they feel comfortable coming to you and being messy, because they're adolescents, they're young
Hmm.
adults. It just that's how it is. It's messy, right? Because and they're trying to figure things out, and we would much rather have them figure it out with us than to tap into all these other places where it could potentially be very harmful. So, yeah.
We're heading, right now as we're recording, we're getting closer to the holidays. And I know that that's a stressful time for everybody, but a big extra stressor for families dealing with these is, what do we say to grandma, or who are we all coming out to, and who gets to know at the Thanksgiving dinner table and who doesn't get to know? Any tips you have for families about, like, I recently had a student who parents were just like, hey, before we just need to slow your coming out process down, because we need to just make sure we're all secure. And, like, again, back to that, like, sort of a are you sure type thing, like, let's let everybody know, because what if you change your mind in 3 weeks? So what thoughts and feelings do you have about just, like, that how to negotiate that process of, like, okay, how and when do, and what if we have family members that we know are not supportive, and so any thoughts on that?
Right, absolutely. That is one of the few things that we did well from the beginning, which I still am, like, in shock about. Um, which was it was always a discussion between the 3 of us, and from really that very first week where, it was, "Who do you want to come out to? Who do you
Mhm.
want to share this with? And who do you want us to help you, be there and support you with as you tell them?" So there's kind of like 3 levels, right? Like, and typically teenagers, they want to tell their friends themselves, of course.
Mhm.
I mean, that makes total sense. Um, I have found, I mean, in our direct experience and in other people's experience as well that I've worked with, that sometimes your child wants you to be present, but they want to be able to say it themselves,
Mhm.
right? And sometimes they want to do it without you there. Sometimes they want you to do it.
Mhm.
So it is all about the most important thing with all of that is it needs to be a decision that you all make together. And not a we don't feel comfortable, so we don't want you to tell anybody.
Hmm.
It is, and that's a very important distinction. This is your child's story, right? And they have their process. The fact that you are in a different place in your process doesn't get to supersede where your child is in their process. And don't my other little thing on that is it's very important to keep those two things separate. Your child is going through enough and processing through enough. They don't need to carry what you are also processing, right? So don't like dump this on like, this is so hard. I don't want grandma to know because this is really hard for me. That's your stuff.
Hmm.
That's your stuff that you work through with your therapist, and that's a whole other thing that, everybody should have a therapist or a social
Hmm.
worker or a support system, and that's I feel that that is a non-negotiable, very important piece of this. That's just my feeling. Um, but, as far as telling people, I say, whatever feels right to you. And as long as you are all on the same page, your child wants to say, let grandma know at the Thanksgiving table. Child lets grandma know at the Thanksgiving table.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just it. When Connor, I mean, he came out to many people at many different times, but it was about a year and a half after he had come out to Steve and me, my husband, that he came out to my parents.
Hmm.
And for many, many reasons, they live far away, being one of them. But he called them. He decided, he's like, I want to do it. I just want to tell them. Right.
Hmm.
So he calls them up and we're all like on the phone because he's like, be on the phone. So we're on a landline, which is why I'm doing this. And we're all, he's like, just be on there and just listen. And I'm listening. And they just happened to be at a museum, and my mom answers and put him on speakerphone, and he decided he was going through. He's like, I made my mind up. I'm going through with this. And I'm thinking, like, you can hear the echo as he's saying, Grandma and Grandpa, I just want to tell you that I'm gay. And it's like echoing in the museum. and and my and they answered very much the way I thought they would. My mom said, well, because my mom always knows, well, I had a feeling. That's what her
Hmm.
response was. And my dad said, well, make sure you get that AIDS vaccine. And I am like biting my lip, like try not to laugh. And he's shaking his head at me from the other side of the room. And I was like, you know what? You shared,
Hmm.
right? Like that was so important to you. What comes back at you is not yours,
Hmm.
right? That's theirs. And
Hmm.
so, and he was very at that point, like he knew that. He was like, all right, done, check. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think one of the things you hit on also, no matter how supportive and ready you are as a parent. Let's say you're a parent and you've got your gaydars going off like crazy. You're like, my kid is, and I've had parents who they want to tear the Band-Aid off and just say, hey, just tell me you're gay already. And the point is, for kids, it's incredibly traumatic to have it's a violation if they are not able to come out at their own pace. So you cannot rush it and you cannot rush them, and they have to be ready to, and there's a great book called Ask the Passengers, by A.S. King, and it's a
Mm.
YA novel, but it's a book where the main character she's gay and her best friend is gay, but she's not even ready to tell her best friend. And there's this thought that, oh, well,
Mhm.
if people are supportive, of course you would want to tell them, but it's about each individual and their own pacing and their own time. And if you try, if you it, for the students that I've worked with, where the parents just kind of said, well, I know this, or you're telling me right now, are you gay or what? Like that is, it's really, really a violation. That's all I can call it, is a violation, and it's really damaging.
It really is. I mean, in so many ways, because this is their story.
Hmm.
This is theirs. And however they want to write it is how they get to write it. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter how messy it is. It doesn't matter if it's not on our timeline. It doesn't matter if it doesn't happen the way we want it to happen.
Hmm.
It happens the way they want to happen. And again, it's circling back to the fact that, many of our kids are coming out now at these, young adolescent, young adult ages where there's so much developmentally going on that it's going to be just really messy, and we have to be patient to let them they're kind of doing two growth pieces at the same time, right? And
Mhm.
those are going to fluctuate. And they may think they come out and they're like, okay, I'm done. I said it. I'm out. Right. And then they realize, okay, there's a little more that I need to process through, or there's a little
Mhm.
more that I need to work through or need support with or whatever. And we can't force that. I mean, we can try all day long,
Mhm.
but until they're ready, it's not going
Right.
to happen.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, this has been so fantastic hearing about the support and learning. So for families again who are and parents particularly who want to learn more and who are looking for that support, where should they go to learn more about you and the podcast and everything that you're doing?
Awesome. Yes, they can go to my website, which is Chrysalis Mama. It's ChrysalisMama.com. And I have everything from the podcast to writing to resources to ways you can work with me on there. And otherwise, you can email me directly, which is hh@chrysalismama.com. So I am, and the web or the podcast again is on all platforms, and it's called Just Breathe: Parenting Your LGBTQ Teen. So
Yeah.
thank
Well,
you.
again, we are so grateful for the work that you're doing because again, it's in order these kids again, they need so much help, and this is such a high risk group. And the more that any person, and even if you're not a parent and you're listening to this, if you're an aunt, if you're an uncle, if you are just an ally in any way,
Yes.
there's a concept called chosen family. And maybe even if you
Mhm.
choose to never have children, like knowing that you can support these kids because some the aunts, the uncles, the coaches can be incredible lifesavers. So even if you're never going to be a parent, listening to this and knowing how to best support someone can really literally be life saving. So please check
Absolutely.
out everything that Heather has on her website because there's something and again, and as Heather keeps updating things, her book and things like that about the terms and stuff like that. Do you want to give a quick plug to
I'm
that? Because that's
sure. Yes, I totally forgot to talk about that. Yes, so I just wrote, it's a little under 50 pages. It's called The Language of LGBTQIA, and it literally answers every question that people have about, what do these words mean? And some of these more complex terms where we're just
Mhm,
really not understanding them. Pronouns, gender identity, what to say and what not to say, what words are not okay, what phrases are
mhm.
not okay. And I worked about 6 months on this and researching and writing, and it's available in ebook form. So yes, you can also find out about that through my website and podcast and everything. But
Yeah,
yes,
and you gotta keep coming back because the language is gonna keep changing. It
that's
just
right.
like and for anybody who's like, "Oh, well, I don't get it. When I was a kid, queer was a terrible term." It's like, yeah, just like every term, every generation, every 3 years, there's new terms for what's cool, what's not, and if you try to, just accept the fact that if you're over 25, you're probably not with the coolest, newest stuff, so just deal with that and,
And you
accept the fact
shouldn't
that you need
be.
to be educated.
Right? There are words that we should not use, like, they
Yeah.
are reserved specifically for our kids to use. Yes, 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 so agreed 100%.
Well, again, if you have questions for me or for Mariska, remember to email us at daniel.magler@live.com. And until we speak again, do whatever it takes to get you through this world. And remember, you are just not allowed to die.